All right. I've worked out the problems on page 5, and the answers are on page 6 of your materials. I'm hoping that this is going to be enlightening. All right, let's start with number 1. Well, you've already read it before, but there's a cool way and there's a usual way of doing this problem. The motorcycle is $2,000, and the buyer must also pay tax, title, and license. They call that TT&L. The tax is 6.25% of the sticker price. It's really important when you see a percent of something because it means the percent times that something. Title fee is $95 and the license fee is $55. What's the total out the door cost? Now, the usual way, and there's nothing wrong with this, people take the $2,000 sticker price, multiply it by the percent, and 6.25% is not 0.625, it's 0.0625. To change a percent to a decimal, you have to move the point 2 places to the left. Aha. So they do that, and you multiply 2,000 by 0.0625, then you add $95 and $55 for the other two things, the license fee and the title fee. Now, the cool way is this. Nothing wrong, again, with the usual way. But the cool way of figuring out this problem is to recognize that 100% of 2,000 is 2,000. Oh, and 6.25% of 2,000 is 0.0625 times 2,000. And when you take 100% of 2,000 and you add 6.25% of 2,000, here it is. That is the same thing as 100% plus 6.25% of 2,000. And that's how you can save yourself some trouble. And you'll also have to know about this cool way before you do some of the problems coming up. So 2,000 times 1.0625, there is your 2125. That's this part right here. And then you add 95 and 55, and you get the same answer. No big deal. All right, problem 2. We have a motorcycle involved. No, we don't. It's a lawnmower. And the out-the-door price is $1,623.75. And this figure includes 8.25% sales tax. Now, here's the tricky part. You cannot work this problem. Well, the question is, what was the cost before the tax, the before tax price? Do not multiply 8.25% by the 1623.75 because that is the out-the-door price. The before price, we don't know. So let's call it X just for grins. Let X be the price before tax. And here's the fun fact. Again, I'm reinforcing this from number 1. 100% of the price before tax, which is X, plus 8.25% of X is the same thing as 108.25% of X. With an equation, we get X, and by the way, X is 1X, and it's also 100% of X, because 100% is 1. So we take the price before tax, we add 8.25%, which is 0.0825, times that price, and we have to get the out-the-door price, which is 1623.75. All right, symbolically, 1x plus 0.0825x, believe it or not, is 1.0825x. Oh, so all we have to do is take out our calculators and divide 1623.75 by 1.0825, and you can verify this with your calculator at your convenience. That turns out to be 1,500. You may pause this and do it yourself with your calculator, either handheld or on the computer. All right, 1991, a new Ford Ranger was $8,000. The sticker price of the 1995 model was $8,520. Now that's bigger than 8,000, so we have a percent increase from the 1991 model to the 1995 model. Now the percent of change, which means the price either increases or decreases, it's the difference between the increase and decrease divided by the old, not the big one, not the little one, but the old one. In this case, percent increase is a percent of the old $8,000. So we take 8520, subtract 8,000, we get 520 divided by 8,000. And happily, this comes out to be 0.065. So the percent increase is 6.5%. Now, if the 8520, if that had been the 1991 price and 8,000 was 1995 price, well, then this would be the percent decrease. No, yeah, but you'd have to divide by 8,520. You always divide it by the old. All right. So we want to deposit enough money at 5% simple interest. Simple interest means you leave your money in there for 1 year, you can withdraw your money, and you can also get 5% of that as interest added on to your 3,000. Excuse me, added on to the amount that you put in, which is not 3,000. Oh. Thing is, we put in X dollars. How much? We don't know. But whatever it is, 100% of X is X. That's what we deposit. And 5% of X is 0.05X. So just like we've had already in this little lesson, 100% of X plus 5% of X is 105% of X. And what we want, notice, you do not take 5% of 3,000 and subtract it, because the 5% interest is on the amount deposited, not on the amount you want to have later. Aha. So the amount deposited plus 5% of that amount is 3,000. And again, X is 1X, and 1 plus 0.05X is 1.05. So you divide 3,000 by 1.05, you get $2,857.14, but it rounds to 28.57. Why did I round it? It says so, to the nearest dollar. How much does he need to deposit? And if you don't round it to the nearest dollar, if you leave it the 14 cents, you will be about 15 cents short of $3,000, but the directions say to round it, answer to the nearest dollar, so do it. Number 5. Sausage, 50% pork, 37% beef, and the rest venison. We don't know how much pork to buy. We don't know how much beef to buy, but we do know that if we have 65 pounds of venison, how do we figure out how much of the pork and beef to buy? Well, here it is. 50% pork plus 37% beef is 87% of those two meats. And you subtract 87% from 100%, you get 13%. So that means your 65 pounds of venison is 13% of the total amount of meat. So we need to determine 13% of what is 87. And we just change 13% to 0.13, and of what means times X, for example, equals 65. Divide both sides by 0.13. Take out your handy-dandy calculator. 65 divided by 0.13 equals 500 pounds. But don't get all excited and write that for your answer, because the question says how much pork. A lot of people put 500. They're so excited they found X. But pork is 50%, 50% pork. So we have to multiply that by 0.5 or 0.50, doesn't matter. And that's why the answer is 250 pounds. Got this problem from real life. There was I don't know if it's still open, but somewhere in San Antonio, something called the barbecue station, and they used to round off their prices to like $6 or $5.50. They didn't want to have a sandwich for $4.93. They wanted to round it off to the nearest something. So what they did was they picked a nice number. However, when they pay the tax to the state of Texas and the county of Bexar and the city of San Antonio, they have to pay a tax on the actual cost of the sandwich. And the $6 includes 7 3/4% sales tax. So how do we figure out what was the actual cost of the sandwich before we got the $6, before we added the tax? So a little recollection here is 7 3/4%. Well, 3/4 is 3 divided by 4, which is 0.75, and the 7 3/4% percent is 7.75%. And as a decimal, you move the point 2 places to the left, you get 0.0775. Now, the sales tax is not 7.75% of $6. Instead, the sales tax is the unknown cost of the sandwich before tax. Excuse me, the sales tax is based on the unknown cost of the sandwich before tax. So if that cost is X, then the cost before tax is X. You add 0.0775X, and the answer is $6. All right. So recall that this X is 1X, and 1X is 100% of X plus 7.75% of X. That is 107.75% of X. We change that to a decimal because that's how we work it with our calculator. And we get 1.0775X equals $6. So we solve that by dividing both sides by 1.0775, and we get $5.568. Now, I put another digit to the right of the pennies because I have to know if that 8 is big enough to round it up to 5.57, and it is. If it's 5 or more, you round it up to the nearest penny, to the higher one. But if that were 5.564, it would remain 5.56. So 5.57 is the cost of the sandwich. There are two ways to calculate, because I asked for two things. I said, how much is the tax and how much is the sandwich? You can either multiply 5.57 by 0.0775, and you can verify that's 0.431, which rounds to 43 cents or $0.43. Now, do not put 0.43 cents. That's a thing. It's 43 hundredths of a penny. All right. So what we could just subtract from $6 to 5.57 and get 43 cents tax. Oh, well, that's easy. The other way to do it, and then don't forget to write both of these answers. If it says how much was the sandwich and how much was the tax, you've got to give me both answers. Number 7, you want to sell a house, but when you do that, you're going to use a realtor, and the realtor you have agreed is going to get 6% of the selling price. Again, when you have percent of, that means the percent times something. So the realtor share is 6% times the selling price. Now, do not take 6% of the seller's share. The seller wants $81,780. The real estate agent doesn't get 6% of that. So you get 6% of the selling price, which we don't know what it is. So if you work this problem on page 5 and you get $86,686.80, that's what you did. You took 6% of the selling price and added it on. It doesn't work that way. So here's your key insight. The realtor gets 6% of the selling price. Then the seller's share is the remaining, what, 94%. Now, where does the 94% come from? Well, the selling price is 100% of itself. If you subtract 6% of itself, you're left with 94% of the selling price. So we got to figure out now, what is the seller's share, which is $81,780? What is that 94% of? Well, it's 94%. Well, this is kind of a cute little error here. I need to fix that. It's 0.94, not 0.094. You get into a bad habit that way. My bad. Okay, 81,780 divided by 0.94 is $87,000, and that is the selling price. And when you take 6% of that, we don't care what that is. But when you take 94% of that, that's the 81,780 that we wanted in the first place. Number 8. This is the easier one of these two things. One is when you know the sticker price, and the other one is when you know the out-the-door price. So notice it says see page 7 in your materials because this is in great detail there. So a car dealer agreed to discount the $18,000 sticker price by 20%. Right? The usual way of doing that is to calculate 20% of 18,000. But the cool way is to calculate the other 80%. Oh, why is that? Because if 20% is discounted, then 80% is remained. So you can either calculate the 3,600, subtract it from 18,000 and get 14,400, or just calculate 18,000 times the 80% that is not discounted, and you get the same 14,400. There's more goodies and news here. So that's the sales price. The tax rate is 6.25%. So you multiply 14,400 by 6.25% as a decimal, you get $900 in taxes, which you add to 14.4, you get 15,300, and then you add the $85 in non-taxable fees. The cool way, again, instead of calculating the 20% that you don't pay, you calculate the 80% that you do. And instead of multiplying that 14,400 by 0.0625, you multiply it by 1.0625 because the 1 stands for the 100% of 14,400. You don't have to do it the cool way. But here's coming up as a reason why you need to know about the cool way. So then you add the $85 and just see how much shorter this is, nice and crisp. There's 3 little calculations, and here you got 5 of them. Number 9 is much more difficult than number 8. And I recommend you look at page 7 because it's all written out in great detail. But I just left the calculation here. So John paid $15,432, and that's what's here in the numerator. This figure includes $115 in fees. So you subtract the fees and 6% sales tax. So you divide not by 6%, you don't multiply by 6%, you divide it by 1.06 because if 6% is added on, that same is the result of multiplying by 106%. So after you do that, you divide it by 0.85. Why is that? Because if the price is 15% less than the sticker price, that means it's 85% times the sticker price. And notice how this number gets to be kind of nice. It gets bigger that way when you multiply. Then when you divide by something less than 1, between 0 and 1, the answer gets bigger, believe it or not. Number 10, somebody wants to take some money from the individual retirement account and needs to have $4,800 cash after paying the government, the Internal Revenue Service, 33%. Here's the of again, 33% times the amount withdrawn is not 33% of 4,800. Don't do that. You got to figure out how much you have to withdraw. Now, here's the straightforward information. The IRS gets 33% of the amount withdrawn. Now, what's left? If you subtract 33% from 100%, what's left is the other 67%. And we know that that's supposed to be 4,800. Oh, so we have to figure out what is 4,800 67% of. That means 0.67 times some number is 4,800. So you divide both sides by 0.67. And you get $7,164.179, which to the nearest penny would be 7,164.18, but it says to the nearest dollar. And if you don't round it off as instructed, you will not get partial credit. To the nearest dollar, well, the 17 cents is, if it's 50 cents or more, then that would be 65, but it's not. It's less than 50 cents, so it's 71.64. And finally, and I will remind you that what I told you some time ago, last week, I guess, there are historically folks get the same sort of problem 4 times, including the final exam. And frequently some folks do not get it even on the final after we've had it 4 times. Yikes. So number 11 on page 5 and 6, and that's what I'm recommending you do, see number 11 on pages 5 and 6. First thing you got to do is how many A's, B's, C's, D's, and F's are there? You must get that right, because if you don't get 43, if you get 42 or 44, that's not what these add up to. Then you're dividing by the wrong number and they'll all be wrong. Yikes. So 5 A's out of 43 grades that's wavy equal signs approximately equal to 0.116279. Now you move the point 2 places to the right, you get 11.62. And notice the nearest 0.1% means you change your answer to a percent, 11.6279. And the nearest 0.1% is the 0.1% is where the 6 is, 0.1%. You keep that same plan going. 12 B's, 12 divided by 43 is 0.2790. which is 27.9. The zero is not big enough. If that were 20.2795, you'd bump that 9. Oh, wait, you can't bump a 9 up to a 10. You can't put 10 in one spot. So you would go over to the 7 and make that 27.0% if that 0 were 5 or more instead of 0. A little tricky, but we didn't get tricked by it. 20 out of 43 is 46.51%, which rounds to 46.5 because it says rounded to the nearest 0.1%. And this is what that means. Okay, 4Ds, 4 divided by 43 is 0.0930, 9.3%. And 2 over 43 equals 0.04651, which is 4.7%. Because you move the point 2 places to the right, you get 4.65. And the 5 is big enough to bump that 6 up to a 7. And that's the way it goes. Cool. Let me go to stop recording and see if we can make that work.